Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Simple enough questions for you, and I wonder if actually I can answer it before we even hit the 15 travel news. This crisis in prisons, very serious. Court orders issued against prison officers protesting against the terms and conditions in which they have to work. What are they protesting against? Oh, it's the usual, is it? They want more money, longer breaks. No, they'd like to stop getting their heads kicked in by prisoners. They'd like to stop living in fear. They'd like to stop turning up at work every day with that knotted bolus in the bottom of their bowels that comes with daily fear of what might be around the next corner or happening to you in the very next hour. And what do? We look away. What do? We sort of shrug and move on. 10,000 prison officers in England and Wales stopped work yesterdays over claims of a surge in violence in jails. I've said to you a few times lately, that woman in Greek mythology, Cassandra, who was cursed with the gift of prophecy that always came true but was never believed. I'm thinking of changing my name to Cassandra. I sometimes don't know why I bother banging. 2 years ago, and the reason for this, oddly enough, was that I had a source, a contact in the prison service, and they were telling me when Chris Grayling was Justice Secretary, do you remember things like banning books and turning off all the televisions in youth offender institutions? And anybody who knew anything about these issues, genuinely, this isn't personally against Chris Grayling, it's sort of against politicians in general, perhaps, who don't get their hands dirty. Anybody who knew anything about prison knew that the governors would be ignoring most of these instructions that were coming from Chris Grayling. There were some they couldn't ignore because they were observable. So this banning books, could you imagine being locked up in your cell for 23 hours a day and the man in charge of the entire system decides to ban books? How could you arrive at that conclusion? And similarly, televisions, which, as any parent knows, are the best babysitters, the best free babysitters in the world, also work with adults. So the idea that you'd be turning off televisions at lights out, what do you think is going to happen? It's a bit like never ever loosening that valve on the top of a pressure cooker. Think of a television or a book or anything like that as the valve on the top of a pressure cooker. And if you never ever loosen that valve, eventually the pressure cooker explodes. Unless there's a lot of people there to sort of loosen the valve at the last possible moment. But that involves personnel, and personnel need morale. It makes me cross, this. And I'll tell you why it makes me cross. It makes me cross, my friends, because it's just another profession now on a list that British society, led by British media, has just ignored. Now, prison officers routinely will not be politically minded necessarily to stick up for firefighters or taxi drivers or junior doctors or teachers or whoever it may be, and that's why it keeps happening. I'm just going to indulge my inner sort of idealist for the moment. That's why it keeps happening, because we don't stick up for each other. So now it's the turn of prison officers. 2 years, if you're kind enough to listen to this programme on a regular basis. Possibly more. It's nearer 3 or 4 now. You have heard me saying everybody I know within this world is describing an escalation and a deterioration unfolding at breakneck speed. You factor in new things like the so-called Muslim gangs in prison, and I say so-called because somebody like Millie Dowler's killer, Levi Belfield, I do not believe has discovered God when he converts to Islam. He is doing so he can be part of some sort of gang within the prison walls and enjoy some sort of special privileges. You know my view on religious privilege. Nobody should get any ever, including me as a church-going Catholic. Nothing. I shouldn't get any. I shouldn't be allowed to dress differently at work. I shouldn't be allowed to observe different holidays from you. I shouldn't be allowed to reject the food that's being provided. If it's a religious belief and you're in prison or you're at work or you're in a public space, park it at the door. Keep it at home. Do it in your own time, not when you're either serving time or on the payroll. But hey, that's a conversation for a different day. Today's conversation is about what's going on in British prisons. I have an almost irresolvably bleak picture of what's going on in prison. And this means 2 things. It means that the situation will be worse than it needs to be for prisoners, and it means it's only going to get worse until prison officers receive the support that they deserve. It's not popular. Do you know what I would do if I wanted to pick a popular cause without being hateful, without sort of saying, oh, I'd get you all to hate on Muslims or hate on immigrants? I'd pick baby hedgehogs. That's what I'd do. If I wanted to really motivate you now to do stuff, baby hedgehogs. I'd get you some pictures of some baby hedgehogs. I'd send you over to the LBC website. Have you ever seen a picture of a baby hedgehog? The cutest creature known to humanity. And I would tell you now, the baby hedgehogs are suffering, friends. The baby hedgehogs need our help. Step up now and support the baby hedgehogs. Send your money now. Send it in now to 84850. Send your money. I need your money. I need your money. For baby hedgehogs. And I get the cute pictures and we set it up and they can't answer back. And then I do a lovely follow-up story where Mrs. Tiggy Winkle has grown up to have a little family of her own. Do you remember when she was living in a sock in the basement of a car park in Stoke Newington? Well, now she's living in a meadow in Devon. Her life is great. Baby hedgehogs. I could get you to care about baby hedgehogs. I couldn't get you to care about teachers. I couldn't get you to care about junior. I know I'm generalising. Lots of people did care, but not enough to make an actual difference. Couldn't get you to care about teachers. Couldn't get you to care about firefighters. Couldn't get you to care about black cab drivers. Couldn't get you to care about junior doctors. Couldn't get you to care about people working in care homes. Couldn't get you to care about any of them. And now I won't be able to get you to care about prison officers. I don't understand why. Keeps me honest. That's why I come to work every day, waiting for the penny to drop. Why? So now it's prison officers. Police, actually, probably next. I know they're already suffering. Cuts, morale, everything. Numbers. But prison officers, that's not a job I'd want to do. Would you want to do that job? I mean, what draws you in to the prison service probably isn't vocation anymore. Phone lines are open if you want to correct me on any of this. But the notion that these guys are living in fear to such a degree that they downed tools yesterday. It's not a strike because they're not allowed to strike. But they thought they'd sort of found a way around it. Health and safety concerns. Talks with government broke down. Just focus on that phrase. I've got a little tickle in my throat. My apologies. There's a lot of it about at the moment. Just focus on that phrase for a moment. Prison officers, not a well-paid profession, okay, by most measures, having talks with government about health and safety, which translates as fear. Fear for their own safety. And they broke down. Talks broke down. And then the Ministry of Justice took legal action to stop what they called unlawful industrial action. So you are looking now, maybe I'm exaggerating. If I am, come and pull the ribbon, calm me down. You are looking now at prison officers like police being in a position where they feel that their workforce is being undermined to the point of personal risk and public safety issues. Might be a coincidence that we've been reading about prison breaks recently, might not, but public safety issues and personal risk. And the Justice Secretary goes to court. Remember, a Justice Secretary who not that long ago was silent when she needed to be sticking up for the primacy of the judiciary. Goes to court to stop them from complaining. What can they do? What can they do? What can a prison officer do if he believes that his safety is in danger every single time he goes to work, but it is unlawful for him to protest? So it was a 24-hour protest, up to 10,000 prison officers in England and in Wales, and it compromised the service, which is why it got filed under industrial action, even though I don't think any of them were downing tools on their sort of daily wage. It was so profound, the effect upon the system, that 6 prison governors who were due to give evidence to the Justice Select Committee yesterday had to go back to prison. So Bob Neal, former deputy chair of the Tory party, and a top man actually, I came back on a train with him from Manchester once, and let's just say we made light work of the buffet car. And he had to say after 90 seconds, this is probably the shortest Select Committee meeting in history, but all the prison governors have had to go back to their prisons. And guess what the meeting was going to be about? Go on, have a guess. Safety in prisons. I don't know what question I'm asking you. I just have this overwhelming sense of dismay when I see another story like this about hard-working men and women playing by the rules, doing everything right, being completely let down, not by government. That goes without saying. We all feel let down by government. They're being let down by us. Bob's in Croydon. Bob, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello there. First time caller.
There's a lot of it about Bob.
I'm just phoning because what you've just said is a complete breath of fresh air to hear a journalist actually talking sense about something that obviously, I'm guessing you've never done time or you've never set foot in a prison.
No, not yet to the first question. Actually, I have to the second.
Okay, but see, that's an informed opinion then. There are so many journalists out there that have a complete disregard, and they vilify prison service staff, police staff, because they have no idea of the daily challenge that a prison officer actually has. What job could you go into and say, I've just cut someone down who's hanging?
Oh, mate.
I've just had to deal with someone who's had their throat gashed open with a homemade blade. You know, there aren't many jobs that have that.
No, you can say that again. And that is not a daily occurrence, but it's a daily possibility.
Well, do you know what? These days it is a daily occurrence. And simply because the staffing numbers have been cut so drastically and so harshly by government, because government have no idea what goes on in a prison. They'll come in... Or
they do and they don't care. There's always that possibility, isn't there? It's because there's no votes in it.
I would err on that side, definitely, that they don't care. And that has been a constant theme. I was a prison officer for 11 years in a London jail. And when I first joined, it was a uniformed sort of... a really well-respected position to have. A lot of ex-military were in that job. Now, you're getting people who have just come out of college who have no idea of what life is about. It's just ridiculous.
And they don't last as long as you did. They don't last 11 years.
Not at all. The turnaround for a London jail, the turnaround is 3 months.
Shut the front door or the cell door.
3 months.
3 months? They come in, they have a look, they lose the plot and leave.
If that. And
right.
I can honestly say in my first 6 months of being a prison officer, I thought to myself, what have I done? I cannot handle this. This is too intense. And it was
why? Talk me through why. I completely respect your... Actually, I'm going to come back to you after the travel news because I haven't actually asked the question yet. Are you all right, Bob? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect.
I just would remind you, I don't know who's listening, so the very graphic descriptions that you provided us with, quite rightly and quite fairly, let's not have any more of those, just in case people listening are, there might be kids in the back of the car, or they might be of a delicate disposition themselves. All right?
No problem.
I'll be right with you. It's 11:16. Prison officers ordered to return to work after a High Court injunction adjudged their protests yesterday unlawful industrial action. Why were they protesting? Up to 10,000 of them? Because they're frightened. Bob used to be one, so he understands things rather better than we do. Where were we, Bob? Thank you for your patience.
That's okay. Firstly, let me just apologise for my graphic description.
Yeah, no, you don't. You don't have to. You don't have to. But that's my job. All right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's just important that the public
absolutely
to know this, because it's almost like an unknown society, and people don't know what goes on behind closed doors. It is a different world entirely, and this is what you have to understand. I didn't go into the job thinking to myself it's going to be rainbows and butterflies. I knew what I was going to be facing.
Yes.
To the extent of what I've seen and what I will always have to live with, I didn't think it would go to that extreme. However, that's something I have to deal with now.
Yes, of course.
Through no help of the prison service. They don't offer counselling. They don't look after their staff. They are pretty much target-driven. There's a hands-off policy with prisoners who are violent, who are mentally disturbed, and who hurt themselves. And as soon as an officer puts hands on a prisoner, you have to justify it. I totally understand that, and I totally accept that, because it's a profession. However, to be told it's a hands-off policy, you've got gangs in there. You were touching on Muslim gangs in prison. I was well aware of this maybe eight or 9 years ago, when it was just starting to come into the prison, and you could see what was going on. It's like feral packs of men who just destroy everyone and everything around them.
It's nothing new. The complexion is new. The description of Muslim is new. But the notion of someone being the daddy, at risk of being glib, it always makes me think of Ray Winston, doesn't it, in Scum? There's always someone who is... First, you've got the people in charge, you've got the authority, and then you've got the wheel within the wheel, which is the prisoners who are kind of in charge of the other prisoners.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's always been there. It's always going to be there. That's life.
You throw in an element of religious privilege, so you're going to get different times and different meals, and it just gives an extra layer of division, an extra layer of separation, and an extra layer of difficulty for people trying to do your job.
And fear. As you say, fear. Now, I can honestly, hand on heart, say I probably feared for my life maybe once in my whole entire career. And that was simply because we had no control. We were overrun completely. You have nowadays you will have 6 officers at best to run a wing of nearly 300 prisoners.
What was it when you started?
When I started, you were looking at maybe 12, 15 staff on a wing.
You could still probably have used more. You could probably still have used more, but it just makes it...
Oh, yeah.
And now this is the bit where I say something like, well, it almost sounds as if they're running the whole system into the ground so that they can carve it off and flog it off to the private sector, and then people in the cheap seats start shouting, "Commie, communist!" Well, not even the cheap seats, actually. But sometimes in the absence of any other better explanation, you reach for the one that's available. And I can't think why a government would do this under such obvious circumstances to anyone, as you said at the outset, who knows, who sees, who explores and inquires. What other explanation can there be? What's yours?
I totally agree with what you're saying. There is obviously an ulterior motive for what they're doing. Much the same as what they do with the NHS. Run it into the ground and it'll be sold off. Run the prison service into the ground, it'll be sold off. G4 will probably buy it, or some other company, Securicor, will buy it. And do you know what? More fool them, because they are buying into a broken system, and it's broken from the top down. Management have no idea what they're doing. They will give out rules one week and then go back on them the next.
And is it true, some of the other things I said, the notion that when that television ban came in, governors would just ignore it because the notion of shutting down every television on a wing at 10 o'clock sharp is impossible, really, because...
It's papering over cracks. There are bigger problems than that. I mean, you could go as ridiculous as something that I'm aware of right now, where they're trying to enforce disciplinary action on staff because of the colour of their socks. I mean, how ridiculous is that? You've got someone who is in dire need of help on a landing, who is completely outnumbered and being assaulted, or the threat of...
He's got the wrong coloured socks on.
And he's got the wrong coloured socks. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they could be wearing anything they want to be wearing. As long as they're going to help me do my job, I couldn't care less.
No, well, I hear you. I can see the importance of uniform rules up to a point, but it's a question of priorities as you describe it. Can you help me out with something, Bob? Because I'm just looking at... I'm just sort of wondering about something. When we mentioned about the books ban, and I've got a tweet that says he's doing post-truth politics again. Does anybody fact-check this guy? Now he's banging on about the prisoners' books ban. Now, you know and I know that books were banned in prisons in November 2013 as part of the Incentives and Earned Privileges scheme, and then it was a High Court ruling that in December of the following year that described this restriction as unlawful. So it was real and it happened, and then it got relaxed. Correct, after being judged unlawful. So somebody like that, PT or PC, I've lost the tweet, thinks I just lied in order to make a point. Now, do I read out these things and correct them on air, even though all you have to do is Google 3 words to find out whether you're right or not? Well, just give me your advice. What do you think?
It's a partial truth. There was a ban on books. However, it was hardback books. Now, people in the general public won't understand why only hardbacks are going to be banned and paperbacks are allowed. Hardbacks are banned because they can be used as armour.
Or to hide things in more easily.
Exactly. Now,
actually, no, I'm just double-checking, and I know you were there, but the paperbacks were banned as well. It was any parcel unless there were exceptional circumstances such as a medical condition.
That's right, unless they come from designated booksellers, so like your Waterstones, WH Smith.
So again, there might have been a rationale for banning hardbacks, but the way it came out of the Ministry of Justice was that they banned all books.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. The muddle and the mess is from the top down. You've got your ground staff, boots on the landing, who are getting mixed messages constantly, and all they want to do is do their job. The people I worked with were fantastic, and I would fight at the gates of hell with any of them. But
there's only so much you can put up with. What am I going to do? Shall I ask people who've actually been on the other side of the cell door to tell me what they? Because I mean, tell you what would be interesting, because if prisoners recognise what a tough time prison officers are having, it becomes a lot more powerful than people like you telling me what a tough time people like you are having, doesn't it?
I mean, it's refreshing to hear a prisoner's view of things, because I would say nine times out of 10 they would agree with us. They would agree that we're overrun. No problem.
Let's find out. Bob, thanks ever so much. No apologies at all for keeping you on air for so long. If you're qualified to contribute to a debate in such an informed fashion, then you can have almost as much time as I can provide. 11:28 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And call it now to contribute to this conversation. I'll come to Michael in Tunbridge first after the news headlines, but I should actually ask you a question. Bob got in a little bit early because he'd actually rung in to draw parallels with the conversation we were having in the first hour about social mobility, also relevant to prison and rehabilitation. So the question I'm asking is, how bad is it? And we have to do what we always do on this programme, which is trust that there will be enough people listening with a profound personal experience to contribute to the conversation. It can be second-hand if you want, but what I'd really like to hear from, is somebody who has been in prison, who sympathises with the prison officers. Someone who has been in prison who sympathises with the prison officers. Can we go out on that limb? Or one of these days we're going to come a cropper, aren't we? Patting ourselves on the back for having so many callers who actually live the story that we're discussing, rather than just getting their insights from the Daily Mail or the Daily Express. 0345 6060 973 is a number to call. As a former prisoner, actually Nick had a current prisoner on the other day, didn't he? So I suppose we should include you in this category as well. As a prisoner past or present, do you actually recognise that life for the average prison officer is becoming untenable, unbearable, unacceptable? Hit the numbers now. We will get through it. I never know quite what to make of it when so many people ring in on issues like this who have been in prison, often relatively recently. But I think on the question of whether or not you feel sorry for prison officers, we may be pushing our luck a little bit too far. Let's find out. You don't have to be in that category, far from it. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 11:30. I would like you to tell me, from the context of having been in prison, whether or not you feel sorry for prison officers. Because if you do, that kind of really just drives a coach and horses through the government's attempts to claim that they are behaving unlawfully. That's a decision for the High Court to take, and they have taken it. I understand why. Police can't go on strike either, for reasons that are fairly obvious. But if prisoners feel sorry for prison officers, then it's going to be kind of hard for the government to argue that the prison officers haven't got much of a grievance, isn't it? Let's find out how we get on. Marvin is in Peckham. Marvin, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, good morning. Yeah, I listen every morning in my van, but this time, this one actually something I can relate to personally.
Good. Oh, I hope there's a bit more. I hope I've done a few topics in the past you can relate to personally.
Yeah, of course. That's why I listen every morning, to be fair. So it's always interesting to listen to, but this one I thought I can have a little bit of an input and give you my side of it.
Good, thank you.
I saw it. Yeah, so basically, I was in Brixton a few years ago.
Okay.
And I noticed there was a lot of staff shortage, because not all prison guards are actually not nice people. Actually, some of them have got a life as well, so they're actually quite cool. You can talk to them.
Yeah.
So there were some days you wasn't allowed that at all, but they'll talk to me through the flap and say, look, there's no staff on, I'm sorry.
Well, so 24 hours then, behind bars?
Sometimes at 23, you might go out to get your food one by one.
And that will be because of staff shortages, usually, that?
That's it. So it wasn't generally to do with violence or anything like that. It was 9 times out of 10, it was due to staff shortage, not to do with a lockdown or some sort of violence.
Sure.
Yes, you know what I mean? So it's been a problem for a while now, and that was back in 2007, so it must be getting worse now.
That paints a picture of staff shortages. It doesn't prove that they are in fear, that they are frightened. I mean, did you feel sorry for them when you were inside?
I think it goes hand in hand, because obviously if there's staff shortages, they're pushed to their limit as well, so they have to do over and beyond extra things or work longer shifts, so it puts them in a mood which automatically would follow down to us as prisoners.
How long were you inside for?
just under 2 years.
Okay, so not that big a window to compare what things were like at the beginning to what things were like at the end. You didn't.
No, of course not. I'm just giving you my insight on how it was through my experience.
And were they at danger? Was it? I mean, is it a job you'd fancy doing if you were allowed to?
All right, I'll paint a picture for you.
Yeah.
Imagine if you've locked up maybe a couple hundred prisoners for over 23 hours, but they had no prior notice, so they're expected to call their kids, or they've made a plan to call their partners the next day, but you're not able to make that call. So the moment you let them out, which is like maybe the following day, everyone's going to be in a bad mood. You know what I mean? So for them, it makes it difficult for them to explain to 300 odd prisoners, sorry about yesterday, there's staff shortages. We're thinking, hold on a minute, there wasn't a staff shortage the day before. So it's like, it automatically gets a bad atmosphere.
And you take it out on the person close to you. You're not going to be able to take it out on the Justice Secretary or the Prisons Minister, are you? You're going to take it out on Mr. Mackay outside the cell door.
Exactly, James. Yeah, so there were times I was a bit upset, but you're not physically going to attack a prison officer, but there are some people out there that are maybe more dangerous than I would be.
Yes.
Consider myself, and they may attack that prison officer. So I could see how they can be unfair.
How often would that kind of thing happen? How often would you hear of or witness attacks on staff?
Well, I was quite fortunate in a sense where Brixton, the staff there were quite well trained, so they knew how to handle situations. There wasn't much attack in that sense, but there are obviously other prisons where the staff may not be as well trained, so things may be opposing them. And
it is something that's deterred. Well, I like that. So it's a lovely start, Marvin. Thanks ever so much for the kind words. Thanks for calling in. Sympathy for prison officers from a former prisoner. So I mean, it's not an absolutely closed down of the debate to say, well, obviously the prison officers are right, but it's certainly a step towards that conclusion. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to contribute. I don't want to confine, just glancing at the screen, I've only got 2 phone lines for you. You can grab the one that Marvin just vacated. I don't want to confine it necessarily to former prisoners, but if, heavens forfend, that turns out to be the direction in which the conversation goes, you can't help wondering, really, whether or not the right people are listening today. If prisoners are queuing up to tell me that they feel sorry for prison officers, then it's going to be very hard to argue that the prison officers haven't got right on their side, isn't it? Anyway, you tell me. And do the opposite as well. Phone me up as a former prisoner and say, no, I don't feel sorry for them. Flipping heck. 0345 6060 973. Theo Ashwood is here, LBC's political editor, who has been charged this morning with keeping an eye on events at City Hall, where Sadiq Khan was due, certainly from my perspective, to be facing the toughest questions of his mayoralty so far with regard to this appointment of a so-called night czar, a female comedian called Amy Lamé.
Yes, Amy Lamé is London's night czar. She is a Labour Party supporter and, as you say, James, a comedian. And she was one of 187 people who applied for the job at City Hall, which pays £35,000 a year for a 2.5 day week. But there are 3 problems which have cropped up. Firstly, her tweets going back over time, over a few years, could at best be described as partisan, at worst offensive in some circles.
She employed the C word to describe George Osborne once.
Yes, she did. The Tories also
Not conservative.
The Tories also think that the role has been specifically adapted for her. When the job was announced, it was going to include being deputy chair of the Nighttime Commission, and that brings with it the power to call in the police and councils to face questions. But now we're told she will just work with the commission. The Tories say that this is because she lacks the relevant experience and gravitas. And finally, there's the fact that she is being paid through a third-party services company. Now, starting with the tweet, the Conservative Assembly member Gareth Bacon read a number of them out, including one aimed at Ruth Davidson, the leader of the Conservatives in Scotland.
When Ruth Davidson won the Stonewall Awards, we saw Tory scum winning Politician of the Year, epic fail. We also saw on the 21st of April this year a tweet that implied regret that the Queen was still alive at the age of 90. And on the 8th of April 2013, the day that Margaret Thatcher died, we had Ding Dong, the witch is dead. Do you consider these tweets to be funny or acceptable?
Well, they're not tweets that I'd endorse or condone at all. And I'm happy for you to raise those questions at the relevant hearing coming up. I think Amy's been appointed because she's the best person for the job.
Now, Mr. Bacon then pressed the point.
Okay, that's interesting. Because on the 25th of November last year, we had, I could say that George Osborne is, and I'm not going to say this word in public, but he has neither the warmth nor the depth And on the 2nd of October 2011, we had housework and hot day and reports from Tory party conference equals headache. Solution equals gin and tonic. And then on the 30th of April last year, we had what desperation David Cameron to use your dead son as a pawn to show you care about the NHS. What about those tweets, Mr. Mayor? Do you think they're funny?
Now, as I said, James, Amy LeMay is paid through her own third-party services company, and this has led to accusations from the Tories of hypocrisy. Mr Bacon quoted Dame Margaret Hodge, who, of course, is a Labour MP and a former chair of the Public Accounts Committee.
Yes, Mr Mayor, the point of using a limited company is invariably to minimise the amount of tax that you pay to HMRC. And we have, as I've just quoted, Margaret Hodge on the record saying, and I'll give you another quote from her, the public sector must maintain the highest standards of propriety in its employment practices if it's to show leadership in the fight against tax avoidance. It must avoid the practice of using off-payroll arrangements for staff who should be on the payroll, a practice which generates suspicions of complicity in tax avoidance and which fails to meet the standards of elected public officials. Do you agree with that statement, Mr Mayor?
Well, I agree with the advice I received from Ed Williams, the head of HR and the head of paid services.
Oh, so you don't agree with Dame Margaret Hodge then?
I agree with the advice as Mayor I received from Ed Williams, Jeff Jacobs and the head of HR.
Excellent. So you're happy that she's avoiding paying tax to the Inland Revenue?
I'm happy with the advice I received from Ed Williams, Jeff Jacobs and the head of HR.
Now, Mr. Williams...
Wish you wouldn't say H. My mum will be going potty down in Kidderminster every time he says that.
Ed Williams and Jeff Jacobs are appearing in front of a scrutiny committee next week, and they'll face further questions about the detail of why Miss LeMay was seen as the best person for the job out of the 187 who applied. Sadiq has been in office now for 6 months. He has run a relatively tight ship. There have not been the problems perhaps that beset the Boris Johnson campaign, especially in the first year or so of his running of City Hall. This is the first really big issue that has cropped up.
And potentially damaging? Or, I mean, can you see her? He's such a lawyer, isn't he? This is why he's quite a frustrating interviewee.
He's very granular.
What does that mean?
It deals with items in particular answers,
yes.
one after the other.
So he provides an academically satisfactory answer, but doesn't answer the question he's being asked.
And then sometimes leaves himself open to the accusation that he's not being completely open and transparent about a particular issue.
Yes.
So Sadiq is finding he has this problem. For the moment, he is standing by Amy LeMay. I asked his spokesman whether he had the full confidence, and I was told absolutely. Whether we're going to have firstly this scrutiny committee next week. I then understand that the Tories want Amy LeMay to come in and face questions herself in front of Assembly members, and it will be interesting to see whether, and the question will be whether those two committees can go ahead, and then at the end of it, whether she still receives the confidence of Mr. Khan and his team at City Hall.
And he had a similar problem with one of his parliamentary aides, didn't he?
Salah.
Tweets that had there's a lesson for us all there. Go through your tweet account if you get appointed to a position of political prominence immediate, or just delete it. Delete your account.
He was, a parliamentary aide, and it came up during the campaign to be mayor. He was relieved of his post immediately. The story was dealt with quickly. He was he was down at the bottom of the food chain, and Mr. Khan didn't actually endorse that appointment personally.
So he could move swiftly, but this is a slightly more, his fingerprints are on this appointment rather more prominently.
Exactly.
All right, great stuff. Theo Washwood, many thanks indeed. Good grief, it's taken us all the way up to 11:45. Why don't prison officers get the public support they so clearly deserve? Well, that's easy. Same reason doctors don't, same reason teachers don't, same reason firefighters don't, same reason black cab drivers don't, same reason nurses don't, same reason care assistants don't, same reason nursing assistants don't, same reason nobody does. Nobody gets public support. This is this post-truth phrase is becoming a little bit tiresome, but only because it's so true. The only thing true about post-truth politics is that politics has gone post-truth. It's all just about... Even Glenn Beck, who's one of the king of the kind of hardcore right-wing commentators in America now, has disowned the alt-right movement and described it as terrifying. Glenn Beck, kind of like... Yeah, we don't have anyone as far to the right as Glenn Beck. But I suppose we sort of have... Well, no, in terms of proper commentators and journalists, we don't have anyone as far to the right as Glenn Beck, and he's now come out and disowned it, which is brave, I have to tell you, because he helped create it. And it's very, very difficult for people to do that. I've asked the question of a couple of slightly more right-wing exponents of this trade recently? Or what has to happen before you think your lot will admit that there's been a terrible mistake, or your lot will admit that there's something horribly wrong going? And the traditional response of rabble-rousers and kind of a post-truth pundits is just to go, oh, no, everything's fine, everything's great, these doom and gloom mongers need to shut up. So no, but seriously, what needs to happen? Glenn Beck has kind of acknowledged that it already has happened. I think that's brave. And there's another mark of how mad 2016 has become. I find myself admiring a stance taken by a commentator, a chap who does something quite similar to what I do for a living, who I consider to be the polar opposite of everything I stand for. Toxic commentator in many, many ways, but like almost all of them, he just thought it was a game. All of these people who are more concerned with reaction than reality. It's all about the emotional reaction. All about the reaction. How big is the reaction? Truth doesn't matter. How big is the reaction? They all think it's a game. They all thought it was a game. It's not a game now. 11:51 is the time. Back to the prison officers. My switchboard is full of people who have heard the clang of a cell door, but they could have been on either side of it. Zoe was on the, well, I suppose I should say the right side, Zoe, in Collier's Wood. What made you pick up the phone?
I'm a new officer, and I can see already how the system's getting worse since I've been there.
How long have you been there?
Just under a year.
Wow. What drew you to the profession? Is it just sort of a job? You needed a job, or was there an ambition to go into this trade profession?
I had a job, but this was more of a career, and I wanted to be able to help to rehabilitate people.
Wow.
But that doesn't seem to be happening much nowadays.
What is happening? What? Just describe your day to me.
We'll come in, realise there's no staff, and that we can't do anything for that day.
In what sort of...
What happens on most days, we don't have enough staff to be able to get the prisoners out, to make phone calls, to get out and have some exercise, to socialise with each other, to have showers. Most days, we don't have enough staff to be able to give them simple things that they should be getting.
And that makes me have sympathy for the prisoners. The conversation is about how difficult your situation is with regard to personal safety and security. Have you felt in danger? Have you felt frightened in your sort of 10 months on the job?
Yeah, definitely, because we can't win. We either get them out with not enough staff and we are in danger, or we don't get them out, and then the next time that they do come out, they're very frustrated and stressed out because they haven't been able to leave, then puts us in danger.
It's mad, isn't it? It's so obvious. That's a bit like what Marvin was saying, actually, from the other side of the cell door, is that, you know, I use the pressure cooker analogy. It kind of works, doesn't it? The longer you're in there, the more pressure builds up. So finally, when you get out, the pressure's got to go somewhere. It's the laws of physics. So, you've been there nearly a year. From the outside looking in, clearly we don't get it, because you'd think it's so blooming obvious what you've just told us and what Marvin told us. What's your explanation for why this is happening, or perhaps more importantly, Zoe, why this is being allowed to happen?
Obviously, they made all the cuts a few years ago, so there's a lot less staff than there was, and there's a massive increase in prisoners. So it's just a vicious circle, and people aren't wanting to join the job. The pay's not great for what you're putting yourself into, and obviously in the media, everyone's seen a lot more recently about what's going on in the prison service, so no one's going to want to join. Which isn't helping. No,
it's uniquely depressing, actually. And the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't really exist, or it went out some time ago.
Unless they do a massive increase of staff, it's not going to get any better. The prisoners are obviously increasing the volume of people coming into prison because rehabilitation isn't working because there's not enough staff to implement it.
So it's turning into an even...
reoffending and coming back.
So the revolving door is revolving ever more quickly. Briefly, when... I can't remember whether it was Liz Truss or Amber Heard, actually, but when it was announced at party conference that they were going to fast-track lots of ex-soldiers into the profession, what was the reaction among you and your colleagues?
Anyone coming in will be a massive help to us, but we do actually have a lot of ex-military that work in there at the moment, and it's great. As long as we're getting people, it's absolutely great for us.
Good. The point being, of course, I suppose, if it works, and there's nothing to stop them signing up already, so the idea that they're going to be newly empowered to become prison officers was a little, shall we say, political. Zoe, good luck. Thank you for the call. 11:55 is the time. Dave is in Camberley. Dave, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time caller, very nervous.
It's only me, seriously.
Zoe and Marvin, they spoke a lot of truth. My dad was a prison officer for 25 years. He served at Long Kesh in Northern Ireland and then a prison in London.
Okay.
I saw him come home at night with black eyes, broken noses. I got into a lot of trouble when I was younger, ended up in scrubs, got my life back on track.
Oh, well done.
Done really well in life now, but I'm really nervous on this call, I tell you.
Don't be. I know you are, but I'll put you at your ease. That's what I'm here for.
Home truths back to my childhood growing up,
Dave.
when my dad used to come home, where an 18-year-old who was about 18 stone split his wrists, and he would break down, even though he had a black eye and what have you, and he used to go to work in a white shirt.
Yeah.
He used to come home and it was red in blood, and the guy would actually end up dead because there wasn't enough officers to save that kid's life.
And this was before the cuts.
And this was before the cuts. And what it must be like now, it must be hell. I mean, I'm very lucky. I only spent 18 months in scrubs. I saw what was going on. I saw the gangs. I saw the violence. And Marvin's right. You cage somebody up for 23 hours a day, they're going to blow. The only way, there is a lot of ex-military in there. There's a lot of good people in there. But unless these people are allowed to do what they need to do, it's just going to blow. And I fear for somebody's life. And it's not only inmates, it's officers as well.
And when you learn that the government goes to court to stop them from protesting...
I do feel they don't have the right to protest. They are yeah, I do. If my dad was here now, because he's dead now, if somebody turned around, the big C got him, but if somebody turned around and said, you know, we're walking out on strike, but you know, he was an orphan, he had a choice. He applied for 2 jobs, a prison officer and a teacher.
God.
The prison officer come through first, so he took it. He kept that job because he got a free house. His life went through. He got promotion, become very high up in the prison service. But he wouldn't walk out. When he died, we went through his stuff. We got letters from inmates from prisons he served at, thanking him for what he done for them. He was a great man, but he wouldn't have walked out because he knew the effects that it could have.
This is nuanced.
And the inmates as well.
This is nuanced.
Sorry?
Because it's not a strike. They're not allowed to strike. They said they were protesting, and a judge decided that it was more than that. It was actually industrial action. But you're right. There's a reason why the police can't do it, and there's a reason why the prison officers can't do it, because in a sense they have too much power imbued in them, don't they?
Yeah.
If the police go on strike, then, you know, the government, they could effectively say, unless you give us £10 billion by tea time, every bank in the country is going to be robbed. So there's a logic behind why, and I understand that. But what can they do, do you think, Dave? If they want to really drive home this point that...
You know, the people who are getting kicked out of the army, massive recruitment drive to them,
but that's money, and it's a cut service. It's just why these pronouncements are so troubling and often ambiguous. I should also apologise for promoting Amber Heard, who is, of course, the estranged wife of Johnny Depp and a well-known Hollywood actress, to the role of British Home Secretary. An office, of course, currently occupied by the similarly, but I don't think it makes my error forgivable, the similarly named Amber Rudd MP.